The conference room smelled of leather and expensive cigars, a scent I'd grown accustomed to over 9 years of sitting in corners, taking notes that no one would read. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, recording words that would never appear in any official transcript. Around the table, men in tailored suits discussed territories and percentages with the casual tone of people ordering dinner, though we all knew the stakes were far higher. I kept my eyes on the screen, my posture perfect, my expression neutral. Invisibility was my greatest skill, cultivated through years of understanding that women in rooms like these survived by being essential, yet unnoticed. A paradox I'd mastered early in my career when I'd accepted this position at Petrov Industries, naive enough to believe it was just another corporate job. The waterfront expansion is non-negotiable, Leonid Morozov said, his thick Russian accent filling the space. He was a broad man with silver-streaked hair and eyes like chips of ice. His presence dominated the room in a way that demanded attention, commanded fear. My organization has invested too much to simply walk away. Across from him, Maxim Petrov remained silent. My employer rarely spoke during these meetings, preferring to let others reveal their strategies while he observed. It was a tactic I'd seen work countless times. Maxim was younger than Morozov by perhaps a decade, lean where the other man was broad, dark where he was silver. But the power he wielded was no less absolute. I'd worked directly for Maxim for 9 years, and I still couldn't claim to understand him. He was controlled, calculating, and utterly unreadable. In all that time, he'd never raised his voice, never shown emotion beyond a slight tightening around his eyes when particularly displeased. Yet people feared him more than they feared Morozov's theatrical displays of anger. "The waterfront belongs to neutral territory," Dmitry Ivanov, Maxim's second-in-command, interjected. He sat to Maxim's right, a position of honor and trust. "We agreed on this 3 years ago." Morozov laughed, a harsh sound that made my shoulders tense even as I continued typing. Agreements change. Circumstances evolve. Surely Petrov understands this. My fingers hesitated for just a fraction of a second. These circumstances, he mentioned, had resulted in 3 deaths last month, 2 disappearances the month before. The waterfront wasn't just territory. It was a pipeline for everything from legitimate cargo to less legitimate imports. Whoever controlled it controlled half the city's underground economy. "Maxim," Morozov continued, leaning forward, "we've known each other a long time. There's no need for this to become unpleasant. Name your price. Whatever it takes for you to see reason." I watched Maxim's reflection in the window behind Morozov. His expression hadn't changed, but something in the set of his shoulders suggested he was calculating, measuring. These negotiations had been ongoing for 6 weeks, each meeting more tense than the last. The entire city felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. "Everything has a price," Morozov pressed, mistaking Maxim's silence for consideration. "Money, territory, business opportunities. I'm prepared to be generous. So tell me, what will it take?" The room held its breath. Even I stopped typing, though I kept my eyes carefully on the screen. In my peripheral vision, I saw Maxim's fingers drumming once, twice against the mahogany table. A rare tell that meant he'd reached a decision. "Say the price," Morozov demanded, his voice harder now. "Let's end this standoff before it becomes something neither of us can control." Maxim's drumming stopped. The silence stretched so long I wondered if anyone would break it. Then I felt it, that particular prickling awareness that meant someone was looking at me. Not the casual glance of men who'd grown so used to my presence they no longer registered me as human, but focused attention. I risked a glance up from my laptop. Maxim was staring directly at me. My heart stuttered in my chest. In 9 years, he'd looked at me perhaps a dozen times with actual focus. I was furniture to him, a necessary function, but not a person. Now his gray eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "The secretary," he said, his voice calm and absolute. The words didn't register at first. I heard them, but my brain couldn't process their meaning in this context. Around the table, I saw similar confusion on other faces. "What?" Morozov asked, the single word sharp with disbelief. Maxim's gaze remained locked on mine for another heartbeat before he turned back to Morozov. "You asked my price. That's it. The secretary." Laughter erupted around the table, not from Maxim's men, who'd learned long ago that their boss never joked during negotiations, but from Morozov's side. The sound was cruel, dismissive. Everything I'd grown accustomed to in this world of powerful men who saw women as decorative at best, irrelevant at worst. "You're joking," Morozov said, though uncertainty crept into his voice as he studied Maxim's unchanged expression. "I never joke about business," Maxim replied. "You want the waterfront? Fine. In exchange, she comes with me." My fingers had frozen over the keyboard. The logical part of my brain screamed that I should keep typing, maintain my professional facade, pretend this wasn't happening. But I couldn't move. Couldn't think beyond the surreal reality that I'd just been named as payment in a territorial dispute between crime lords. "Larissa has worked for our organization for years," Dmitri said carefully. I noticed he didn't look at me either, as if acknowledging my humanity would somehow make this more complicated. "She handles sensitive information, knows our operations inside out. Surely there's another arrangement." "That's my price," Maxim interrupted, still watching Morozov. "Take it or prepare for war. Your choice." Morozov's face had gone red. "You'd trade the waterfront for a secretary? What game are you playing, Petrov?" "No game. You wanted a price. I've named it." I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. "I'm not property to be traded." Every head in the room turned toward me. I'd broken the cardinal rule, speaking without being addressed. But something in me had snapped at hearing myself discussed like a chess piece, valuable only for strategic positioning. Maxim's expression didn't change as he looked at me again. "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not. Which is why this works. Morozov gets what he wants. I get what I want. And you." He paused, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You get a choice you haven't had in a very long time." "This is absurd," Morozov sputtered. "The woman is nothing, a secretary who takes notes. You're telling me she's worth the entire waterfront operation." "Apparently to me, she is." Maxim's voice remained level, almost bored. "You have 48 hours to decide. The waterfront for Larissa's transfer to my direct employment. Those are the terms." "Direct employment? Doing what, exactly?" I demanded, finding courage in my anger. 9 years of swallowing words, of staying silent, of playing small. What role am I supposedly filling that's worth giving up millions in revenue? Maxim turned to me fully for the first time, and the weight of his complete attention was almost physical. "One where you actually matter," he said simply. "Where what you know, what you see, what you understand about all of this." He gestured vaguely at the room. "The business, the entire empire, actually gets used for something beyond typing meeting minutes no one reads." The truth of his words hit harder than I expected. He knew. Somehow he knew that I understood far more than anyone had ever credited me with. That I'd spent 9 years watching, listening, connecting dots that these men were too arrogant or too stupid to see. "You can't be serious about this," Dmitri said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at Maxim with something approaching understanding, as if pieces were clicking into place. 48 hours, Maxim repeated, standing. The movement was graceful, controlled, signaling the meeting's end. "Think carefully, Leonid. This offer won't come again." As Maxim's team began to file out, I remained frozen in my chair. Vitaly Kuznetsov, one of the security detail, paused by the door. Miss Larissa, Mr. Petrov would like you to join him. It wasn't a request. I saved my notes mechanically, closed my laptop, and stood on legs that felt disconnected from my body. As I walked past Morozov, I felt his gaze rake over me, assessing, calculating, trying to understand what Maxim saw that he'd missed. "This isn't over," he called after me, though I wasn't sure if he was speaking to me or to Maxim's retreating form. The hallway outside the conference room was mercifully empty. I followed Vitaly toward the executive elevator, my mind spinning. This had to be some elaborate power play, a negotiation tactic I was too inexperienced to recognize. Maxim Petrov didn't care about secretaries. He barely acknowledged my existence most days. The elevator doors opened directly into Maxim's private office, a sprawling space of dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood by those windows now, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the skyline he partially controlled. "Sir," I began, my professional training kicking in despite everything. "I don't understand what just happened." "Don't you?" He didn't turn from the window. "You're an intelligent woman, Larissa. Perhaps the most intelligent person in that room. Surely you can deduce my reasoning." I set my laptop bag down carefully, buying time to think. "You're making a point, showing Morozov that you value things he doesn't, establishing some kind of psychological dominance. Partially true." He turned then, and in the better light of his office, I could see details I'd never noticed before. The faint scar along his jawline, the way his expensive suit couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. But not entirely. "Then explain it to me," I said, frustration bleeding through my careful composure. "Because from where I'm standing, I just became a bargaining chip in a war I never asked to be part of." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "You've been part of this war since the day you took this job, Larissa. You just weren't acknowledged as a player." He moved to his desk, poured 2 glasses of what I knew was prohibitively expensive vodka, and slid one toward me. "Morozov will accept my terms. He has no choice. The waterfront is too valuable to walk away from." I didn't touch the glass. "And then what? I'm transferred to your employment like office equipment? What exactly does that mean?" "It means you stop being invisible." He took a measured sip of his vodka. "You stop sitting in corners, pretending not to understand the implications of what you're hearing. You stop limiting yourself to typing and filing because that's the only role these men can conceive of a woman filling." "You're offering me what, exactly? A promotion?" The absurdity of it made me laugh, a sharp sound that echoed in the large office. "I'm offering you relevance." His voice was quiet but firm. "For 9 years, you've been the smartest person in every room, and everyone treated you like wallpaper. You've watched deals unfold, seen patterns, understood connections that took my analysts weeks to map out. Don't think I haven't noticed." The admission stunned me into silence. He'd noticed. All this time I'd assumed my observations went completely unrecognized. "I need someone who sees what I see," Maxim continued. "Someone who understands this world, but isn't corrupted by ego or ambition. Someone who knows when to speak and when to listen. You've proven you're that person. By staying silent and invisible for 9 years, bitterness crept into my tone. By staying alive for 9 years in an environment that destroys most people." He set down his glass. "Do you know how many assistants and secretaries have worked for various members of our organization in the time you've been here?" I did know. I'd seen them come and go, casualties of asking the wrong questions, knowing too much, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. 17. Maxim answered his own question. "You're still here because you're smart enough to understand the rules, disciplined enough to follow them, and perceptive enough to know when they're about to change. Those are rare qualities, Larissa. Especially the last one. I finally picked up the vodka glass, needing something to do with my shaking hands. This is insane. You're trading the waterfront for a secretary because you think I'm perceptive. I'm trading the waterfront because I no longer need it, and because removing you from Morozov's organization cripples him in ways he doesn't yet understand. Maxim's smile was cold, calculating. You know things about his operations that could unravel everything. You've been in those meetings, heard those discussions. You're not just an asset, Larissa. To him, you're a liability he never properly secured. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about me at all. It was about weakening Morozov, about removing a source of information while appearing to make a ridiculous concession. I'm not a spy, I said firmly. I'm not going to betray confidences or share information, regardless of who signs my paychecks. I know. His answer surprised me. That's another reason I chose you. Loyalty isn't something money can buy, not the real kind. You've proven your integrity by staying silent even when speaking up might have advanced your position. That matters. I drank the vodka in one swallow, feeling it burn down my throat. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to trust yourself. He moved closer, though still maintaining professional distance. I'm asking you to stop hiding what you're capable of. The question is whether you're brave enough to step out of the shadows. Brave. The word rattled something loose in my chest. I'd spent so long equating survival with invisibility that I'd forgotten what courage looked like. But standing here, being seen, actually acknowledged as something more than a function, I felt that old familiar fear warring with something else. Possibility. What happens if I refuse? I asked. If I say I want to stay where I am? Maxim studied me for a long moment. Then you stay. I'll find another way to handle Morozov. But Larissa. He paused, and for the first time, I heard something almost gentle in his voice. You deserve better than spending your life making yourself small for the comfort of smaller men. The truth of it settled into my bones. I thought of Tatiana Laurent, one of the few other women who worked in this building, always deferring, always apologizing for taking up space. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed insights, buried observations, made myself convenient and non-threatening. I need time to think, I said finally. You have 48 hours. Maxim returned to his desk. The same deadline as Morozov. Whatever you decide, Larissa, know that I see you. I always have. As I left his office and rode the elevator back down to the administrative floor, my reflection in the polished doors showed a woman I barely recognized. Same dark hair pulled back in a professional bun. Same charcoal suit. Same understated appearance. But something in my eyes had changed. For 9 years, I'd believed invisibility kept me safe. Now I was being offered visibility, acknowledgement, and all the danger that came with it. The question was whether I was ready to stop hiding. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the familiar hallway, knowing that whatever I decided in the next 48 hours would determine not just my career, but my entire future. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a building far from the opulent towers where men like Maxim Petrov and Leonid Morozov lived, felt smaller than usual. I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur in the rain, replaying every moment of that surreal meeting. The secretary. The words kept echoing in my mind, layered with implications I was only beginning to unpack. My phone buzzed around midnight. An unknown number, but I recognized the format. The same system used for all internal communications at the organization. The message was brief. Conference room A, 9 a.m. Come alone. Morozov. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. He wanted to meet with me directly, something that had never happened in 9 years. I should have deleted the message, Should have reported it to someone. Instead, I found myself typing back. I'll be there. The response came immediately. Smart girl. The condescension in those 2 words made my jaw clench. But I'd agreed, and backing out now would only show weakness. Besides, some part of me needed to understand what he saw when he looked at me, what he thought I was worth. I arrived at the office early the next morning, before the administrative staff, before the executives. The building had a different quality in the pre-dawn hours, all shadows and echoes, the true nature of what happened here less carefully hidden. Conference room A was on the 15th floor, not the executive level, but not quite the working floors either. A liminal space for meetings that didn't officially exist. Morozov was already there, standing by the windows much as Maxime had been the day before. But where Maxime had seemed contemplative, Morozov radiated barely contained energy, like a predator pacing its cage. Larissa, he said without turning. Punctual. I appreciate that. I set my bag down but remained standing, keeping the conference table between us. What do you want, Mr. Morozov? Straight to business. I like that too. He turned, and I was struck by how different he seemed in this private context. Less theatrical, more dangerous. Petrov has put me in an interesting position. I'm curious what you make of it. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play stupid. You're many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. He values you enough to trade the waterfront. That's either brilliant strategy or complete insanity. I need to know which. Perhaps you should ask him. Morozov smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm asking you. What does Maxim Petrov see in his secretary that's worth millions in revenue? The question hung between us, loaded with danger. How I answered would reveal how much I understood, how much I was willing to admit. He sees someone who pays attention, I said carefully. Someone who understands context. Context. Morozov tasted the word. You mean you know things. You've been in those meetings, heard things that could be valuable to the right person. There it was, the real reason for this meeting. He wanted to know if I could be turned, if I was an asset he could claim for himself. I know that I've spent 9 years learning to keep my mouth shut, I replied. It's kept me alive this long. Alive but invisible. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, expensive and overwhelming. Is that really what you want? To keep being furniture while men make decisions about your future? As opposed to what? Being a pawn in someone else's game. As opposed to playing your own game. Morozov's voice dropped. I'm prepared to make you an offer, Larissa. A better offer than whatever Petrov has promised. I should have seen this coming. Of course he'd try to recruit me, to turn Maxim's move against him. I'm listening. Stay with my organization. I'll double your salary, give you a real title, actual authority. You won't just be taking notes, you'll be making decisions. He paused. And you'll tell me everything Maxim Petrov is planning. The offer was tempting. I couldn't deny that. Money, power, recognition, all the things I'd convinced myself didn't matter. But the price was clear. Betray Maxim, become a spy, trade one form of imprisonment for another. Why? I asked. Why do you suddenly care about what I think, what I know? You've ignored me for years. Because Petrov forced me to look at you. There was grudging respect in his voice. He saw something I missed. That's unacceptable. If you're valuable enough for him to trade the waterfront, then you're valuable enough for me to keep. Keep. I repeated the word, letting him hear how it sounded. Like property. Morozov's expression hardened. Don't pretend you're not a commodity in this world. We all are. The only difference is the price we command. And what's your price? I challenged. What did you trade to get where you are? For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Might have been memory or regret. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Everything that mattered, which is why I recognize when someone else is about to make the same mistake. You think accepting Maxim's offer would be a mistake? I think Petrov doesn't do anything without 3 layers of strategy. Whatever role he's offering you, it serves his purposes first. Morozov moved to the table, poured himself coffee from the carafe that someone must have prepared earlier. At least with me, you know where you stand. I'm offering you a clear transaction. Your knowledge for your advancement. And with Maxim? With Maxim, you'll spend your life wondering what game you're really playing. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of the cup. He's more dangerous than I am, Larissa. Because he makes you think you have choices when really, you're just moving along paths he's already designed. The assessment was uncomfortably close to my own fears. What if Maxim was simply using me as a piece in some larger scheme? What if this sudden visibility was just another form of manipulation? I need to think about it, I said, hating how uncertain I sounded. You have time. 48 hours until I have to respond to Petrov's terms. Morozov set down the cup. But understand this. Whichever choice you make, you're choosing a side. There's no neutral ground anymore. Not after yesterday's meeting. He left me there, alone in the conference room with my spiraling thoughts. Through the windows, I could see the sun rising over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Beautiful and deceptive, like everything else in this world. My phone buzzed. Tatiana Laurent, one of the few people in this building I'd call a friend, asking if I wanted to grab coffee before work started. I typed back, yes, grateful for the excuse to escape my own mind. We met at the cafe on the ground floor, a space designed for comfort and surveillance in equal measure. Tatiana looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Rough night? I asked as we collected our drinks. Marcus is teething again. I haven't slept more than 3 hours straight in a week. She smiled, but it was strained. How about you? You look like you've seen a ghost. I almost laughed at the understatement. Something like that. We found a table in the corner, away from the other early morning arrivals. Tatiana studied me with the concern of someone who'd learned to read between the lines of carefully maintained facades. This is about yesterday's meeting, isn't it? The rumors are already spreading. Of course they were. In an organization like this, information moved faster than official communications. What are people saying? That Petrov traded you to Morozov for the waterfront, that you're being transferred, that there was some kind of confrontation. She lowered her voice. Larissa, what really happened? I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, feeling its warmth seep into my perpetually cold fingers. Maxim offered me a different position. Morozov wants me to stay. I have 48 hours to decide which path to take. Tatiana's eyes widened. He's actually giving you a choice? Apparently. That's unprecedented. She leaned forward. What are you going to do? I don't know. The admission felt like failure. Both options terrify me. Stay invisible and safe, or step into the light and become a target. You've never been truly safe here, Larissa. None of us are. Tatiana's voice carried the weight of experience. The question is whether you're willing to risk visibility for the chance at something more. More what? Power? Look where that's gotten everyone around us. Autonomy, she corrected. The ability to make decisions instead of just recording them. To use everything you've learned instead of burying it. I thought about all the meetings I'd sat through, all the observations I'd swallowed, all the moments when I'd seen solutions no one asked for. 9 years of intellectual suffocation, wrapped in the safety of irrelevance. What would you do? I asked. Tatiana was quiet for a long moment. I'd be terrified. she finally said. But I'd also be curious. Maxim Petrov doesn't make careless moves. If he thinks you're worth the waterfront, there's a reason. Maybe it's time to find out what you're actually capable of. Her words stayed with me throughout the day as I went through the motions of my job, typing meeting notes, organizing files, maintaining the careful facade of normalcy while my entire world balanced on the edge of transformation. Around noon, Dmitry Ivanov stopped by my desk. He'd never done that before, always communicating through email or brief encounters in conference rooms. "Larissa," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "May I have a moment?" I gestured to the empty chair across from my desk, hyper-aware of the other administrative staff pretending not to watch. He sat, his large frame dwarfing the standard office furniture. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday, the way we discussed you as if you weren't in the room." The unexpected apology caught me off guard. "It's fine. It's not." He met my eyes directly. "I've worked with Maxim for 15 years. I've never seen him make an offer like this. I think you should know that." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to make an informed decision." Dmitry glanced around, ensuring privacy before continuing. "Maxim sees things the rest of us miss. People think he's cold, calculating, and he is. But he's also fair in ways this world rarely allows. If he says he values what you bring, he means it. And you think I should accept his offer? I think you should trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long." He stood, preparing to leave. "For what it's worth, I hope you choose to join us. We could use someone who isn't afraid to see clearly." After he left, I sat staring at my computer screen, no longer seeing the words displayed there. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about what I should do, what path I should take. Morozov's transactional clarity, Tatiana's encouragement toward autonomy, Dmitry's quiet endorsement of Maxim's intentions, but none of them could make this decision for me. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I requested a private meeting with Maxim Petrov. The response came within minutes. His office, 7 p.m. The executive floor was quiet when I arrived, most of the staff long gone. Vitaly Kuznetsov stood guard outside Maxim's office, nodding respectfully as he opened the door for me. Maxim stood by his windows again, and I wondered if this was where he came to think, to plan, to see the city he partially controlled from this height. "Larissa," he said without turning. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd come. I have questions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." He turned, gesturing to the sitting area rather than the formal desk, a small acknowledgement of something more personal than business. I took the offered seat, gathering my courage. "Morozov met with me this morning. He made me an offer." Maxim's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. "Did he? He wants me to stay with his organization. Double salary, real authority, in exchange for information about you." Clever. Maxim poured 2 glasses of vodka, sliding one toward me as he had before. "And are you considering it?" "I'm considering everything." I took the glass but didn't drink. "I need you to tell me the truth, Maxim. What do you really want from me?" He settled into the chair across from me, his long frame deceptively relaxed. "What do you think I want?" "I think you want to weaken Morozov by removing an asset he didn't realize he had. I think you want someone who understands the patterns, who can anticipate moves before they're made. I think you want to use what I know." "All true," he agreed, "but incomplete." "Then complete it." Maxim took a measured sip of his vodka. "I want someone I can trust in a world built on betrayal. I want intelligence that isn't corrupted by personal agenda. I want." He paused, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in his expression. "I want to stop wasting potential. My potential. Everyone's potential. This life, this business, It's designed to use people up and throw them away. You've watched it happen. Hell, you've documented it. His eyes met mine. I'm offering you something different. Not safety, I can't promise that. Not power in the traditional sense. But relevance, purpose, the chance to actually matter. To you, I clarified. The chance to matter to you. To yourself, he corrected. Everything else follows from that. I finally drank the vodka, needing its burn to center me. Why me, Maxime? Really? Of all the people you could have chosen. Because you're the only one who doesn't want something from me. His answer was simple, devastating in its honesty. Everyone in my life wants power, protection, advancement. You just wanted to do your job and be left alone. That kind of integrity is rare, irreplaceable. And you're willing to trade the waterfront for it. The waterfront is territory. Territory can be regained. He leaned forward slightly. But someone who sees clearly, who understands without agenda, who can be trusted in a world of liars, that's worth more than any piece of ground. I set down my glass, my hand steadier now. If I accept, things will change. Morozov won't take kindly to losing what he sees as his asset. No, he won't. Which is why I need your answer before the 48 hours are up. Maxime's voice was calm, but I heard the urgency beneath. Whatever you decide, Larissa, it has to be your choice. Not because I'm forcing you, not because Morozov is threatening you. Your choice. And if I choose to leave, to walk away from both of you, something that might have been pain flickered across his face. Then you leave. I'll make arrangements for your safety, ensure you have resources to start somewhere else. But I won't chase you. The offer was more than I'd expected, more freedom than anyone in this world typically received. It made his earlier statement about valuing my autonomy feel genuine rather than strategic. I need tonight, I said, to think without pressure, without anyone trying to influence my decision. Maxime nodded slowly. You have until noon tomorrow. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. As I stood to leave, he caught my hand gently. The touch was brief, professional, but it sent electricity up my arm. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I hope you choose yourself. Whichever path that leads to. I left his office with those words echoing in my mind. Choose yourself. Such a simple instruction, but one I'd spent 9 years forgetting how to do. That night, I sat by my window again, watching the city breathe below. Somewhere in those lights, Maxim Petrov was planning his next moves. Somewhere else, Leonid Morozov was calculating advantages. And here I was, a secretary they'd turned into a prize, trying to remember who I'd been before I learned to make myself invisible. By dawn, I knew my answer. I arrived at Maxim's office at 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my deadline. Vitaly opened the door without a word, his usual stoic expression giving nothing away. Inside, I found Maxim standing at his desk, reviewing documents with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. He looked up as I entered, and I saw the question in his eyes before he could voice it. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Maxim set down the papers, giving me his complete attention. I'm listening. I accept your offer. On 3 conditions. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Name them. I'd spent the entire night preparing for this moment, understanding that how I negotiated now would set the tone for everything that followed. First, I want complete transparency about what you expect from me. No games, no hidden agendas. If I'm going to be useful, I need to understand the full picture. Agreed. Second, I maintain my own apartment, my own space. Whatever this arrangement is, I'm not moving into some controlled environment where every aspect of my life is monitored. Maxim's jaw tightened slightly, the first sign of resistance. That's not about control. It's about security. If you're working directly with me, you become a target. Then increase security on my building. But I need somewhere that's mine, not yours. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Acceptable. And the third condition? This was the difficult one, the boundary I needed to establish clearly. If I ever tell you I want out, you let me go. No threats, no consequences, no hunting me down. My choice remains my own. The silence that followed stretched so long I wondered if I'd overstepped. But when Maxim finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't expected. That's the one condition I can't fully guarantee. He raised a hand as I started to protest. Not because I want to control you, but because once you're fully integrated into this world, there may be things you know that others would kill to possess. Your safety might require protection you see as imprisonment. The honesty was sobering, a reminder that this decision wasn't just about employment, but about fundamentally altering my position in a dangerous ecosystem. Then promise me this, I said. Promise that if that happens, you'll always tell me the truth about why. No manipulation, no pretty lies about it being for my own good. I need you to respect me enough to be honest. Maxim moved around the desk, stopping just close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. I promise. Transparency in both directions, Larissa. You'll always know where you stand. Then we have an agreement. I extended my hand, formal, professional. He took it, his grip firm and warm. Welcome to my inner circle, such as it is. What happens now? Now we prepare for tomorrow's meeting with Morozov. He has until 5 p.m. to respond to my terms. I expect he'll try to negotiate, possibly make one final attempt to recruit you directly. He already did, I admitted. Yesterday morning, he offered to double my salary and give me authority in exchange for information about you. Maxim's expression didn't change, but I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. And you're telling me this because transparency works both ways. You should know that he approached me, and you should know that I considered it. I met his gaze directly. I chose this path, but it wasn't my only option. Something dangerous and pleased flickered in his eyes. Good. Never forget that you have options, Larissa. It'll keep us both honest. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Dmitri briefed me on the key players who would be at tomorrow's meeting, their positions, their likely reactions. Vitaly walked me through new security protocols, including the discreet team who would now be monitoring my building. We'll be invisible, Vitaly assured me as I reviewed the plans with growing unease. You won't notice us unless there's a problem. And if there is a problem? His smile was grim. Then you'll be very glad we're there. That evening, as I returned to my apartment, I noticed the changes immediately. New locks on the door, subtle cameras in the hallway, the building's elderly doorman replaced by someone younger, harder, clearly military in bearing. My phone buzzed as I closed the door. Maxim. Too much? I typed back. I'll adapt. His response came quickly. That's what I'm counting on. The meeting the next day was scheduled for 2 p.m., neutral territory at an exclusive club that neither Maxim nor Morozov owned, but both used for sensitive negotiations. I dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation. If I was going to stop being invisible, I needed to look the part. Maxim's car picked me up at 1:30. He was already inside, reviewing notes on his tablet. He glanced up as I settled into the leather seat, his gaze traveling over my appearance with professional assessment. You look ready, he said simply. I don't feel ready. Good. Overconfidence is dangerous. He set aside the tablet. Morozov will try to speak to you directly. He'll make it seem casual, friendly even. But every word will be calculated to make you question your choice. How do you want me to respond? However you feel appropriate. His answer surprised me. You're not my puppet, Larissa. I value your judgment. Use it. The club was elegant in that understated way that screamed old money and older power. We were escorted to a private dining room where Morozov was already waiting, flanked by his own advisors. His eyes locked on me immediately, cataloging every detail. Larissa, he said, standing as we entered. You look different. I'm the same person I was 2 days ago. Are you? His smile was knowing. I wonder. Maxim guided me to a seat across from Morozov, positioning himself beside me rather than at the head of the table. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. This negotiation was about me, and he was acknowledging it openly. Shall we begin? Maxim asked, his tone businesslike. By all means. Morozov settled back in his chair, projecting casual confidence. I've reviewed your terms, Petrov. The waterfront for your secretary. It's an interesting proposal. And I'm prepared to accept, with one modification. Here it was, the counter-proposal I'd been warned to expect. I kept my expression neutral as Morozov continued. Larissa comes with me for a trial period, 6 months. If after that time she chooses to join your organization, the waterfront is yours. If she chooses to stay, the deal is void. It was clever, I had to admit. He was betting that 6 months under his direct authority would make me see his offer as superior. Or perhaps he was betting that he could extract enough information in that time to offset losing the waterfront. No, Maxim said flatly. You're not even going to consider it? Morozov feigned surprise. I'm giving her a choice. Isn't that what you claim to value? A choice made under your influence isn't a real choice. As opposed to the choice she's making under yours? Morozov's gaze shifted to me. What do you think, Larissa? Are you afraid of spending 6 months working for me? Afraid you might find it preferable? Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment I'd been warned about. Morozov trying to sow doubt, to make me question Maxim's motives. I could stay silent. Let Maxim handle it. That would be the safe choice. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. I think your offer is designed to look like freedom while actually being a different form of control. You're betting that in 6 months you can manipulate me into choosing you. Or failing that, you'll have extracted enough information to make losing the waterfront worthwhile. Morozov's smile widened. Smart girl. You've learned well. I've been paying attention for 9 years, I replied, which is exactly why I've already made my choice. I'm not interested in a trial period. Something flickered in Morozov's eyes. Might have been respect, or might have been anger. You're certain? Because once this deal is finalized, there's no going back. I'm certain. He studied me for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Maxim. You've trained her well. Or perhaps she was always this clear-sighted and we all missed it. The latter, Maxim said quietly. Which is why she's valuable. Morozov sighed, a theatrical sound that didn't quite mask his irritation. Very well. The original terms stand. The waterfront transfers to me, Larissa transfers to you. We'll need 48 hours to prepare the paperwork. Agreed. As the meeting continued with technical details about the transfer, I felt the reality of my decision settling into my bones. I'd chosen Maxim, chosen visibility, chosen to step into a role I didn't fully understand yet. There was no going back now. Near the end of the meeting, as people began gathering their materials to leave, Morozov stood and moved around the table toward me. Vitaly tensed, but Maxim raised a hand slightly, allowing the approach. May I have a word? Morozov asked, his tone almost gentle. I glanced at Maxim, who nodded once. We stepped to the side of the room, far enough from the others to create an illusion of privacy. I want you to know something, Morozov said quietly. What Petrov is offering you, this visibility, this power, it comes at a cost. You'll never be just yourself again. You'll always be his asset, his advisor, his responsibility. Is that really the freedom you want? Is anyone truly free in this world? I countered. We all serve something or someone. True. But at least with me, you'd know exactly what you were trading. Petrov makes you think you're getting choice when really, you're just accepting a different cage. I thought about his words, about the security detail now watching my apartment, about the ways my life had already changed. Maybe. But at least it's a cage where people see me for what I am, rather than what they assume I should be. Morozov's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You know, if circumstances were different, I think we could have worked well together. You have steel in you, Larissa. Don't let anyone dull it. I don't intend to. Good. He extended his hand. Then I suppose this is goodbye. Or perhaps until our paths cross again in some other negotiation. I shook his hand, feeling the finality of the gesture. When he released me and walked back to his side of the room, I understood that a bridge had been crossed. I was no longer neutral territory, no longer invisible. I was explicitly aligned with Maxim Petrov, with all the safety and danger that implied. The drive back was quiet. Maxim worked on his tablet while I stared out the window, processing everything that had just happened. As we pulled up to his building, he finally spoke. You handled that well, better than I expected. You expected less? I expected more caution. You were bold with Morozov. Should I not have been? Maxim smiled, a rare, genuine expression. No, you should absolutely keep being bold. It's refreshing. We rode the private elevator up to his office, where Dmitri was waiting with files and contracts. The next 3 hours were spent reviewing documentation, signing agreements, understanding exactly what my new role would entail. You'll be officially listed as Senior Strategic Advisor, Dmitri explained, sliding a contract across the desk. It's vague enough to encompass whatever Maxim needs, specific enough to give you authority when necessary. I scanned the document, noting the salary that was triple what I'd been making, the benefits package that included security as a line item. This is generous. It's appropriate, Maxim corrected. You'll be working directly with me on decisions that affect the entire organization. You should be compensated accordingly. As I signed the final contract, making everything official, I felt the weight of the moment. 9 years as invisible furniture, and now this. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. What happens now? I asked, setting down the pen. Now we get you properly integrated. Maxim stood, moving to the windows. You'll need to meet with department heads, understand the full scope of our operations. You'll attend all strategic meetings, not as a note-taker but as a participant, and you'll need training. Training? Security protocols, threat assessment, how to navigate this world at a level you haven't experienced before. He turned to face me. You're no longer in the background, Larissa. You're in the spotlight, and that requires a different skill set. The reality of it was daunting. But as I stood there in Maxim's office, officially his senior strategic advisor, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The future was uncertain, probably dangerous, but it was mine to shape. When do we start? I asked. Maxim's smile was slight but approving. Tomorrow. Tonight get some rest. Your old life ends at midnight. Tomorrow, we build your new one. As I left the building that evening, escorted discreetly by Vitaly to my car, I caught my reflection in the lobby's polished marble. The same face, the same person, but standing differently. looking at the world with new eyes. I'd made my choice. Now I had to learn how to live with it. My first week as Maxim's senior strategic advisor felt like learning to breathe in a different atmosphere. Everything I'd observed from the shadows for 9 years took on new dimensions when I was expected to contribute rather than simply record. The morning after our agreement was finalized, Dimitri arrived at my apartment at 7 a.m. with coffee and an agenda that made my head spin. "First item," he said, settling into my small kitchen like it was a war room. "Department briefings. You need to understand every aspect of operations, not just the pieces you've seen in meetings." We started with legitimate businesses. The import company that served as our primary front, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolio. Then we moved into grayer territory, the security consultancy that was actually a private army, the logistics company that moved more than just legal cargo, the network of restaurants and clubs that served as information hubs. "You've documented most of this over the years," Dimitri noted, watching my face carefully. "But documentation is different from understanding strategic implications." "I understand more than you think," I replied, pulling up files on my laptop. "For instance, the import company's shipping schedule correlates suspiciously well with increases in police presence at the docks. Someone's feeding information to law enforcement." Dimitri's eyebrows rose. "You noticed that. 3 years ago, I included it in a quarterly report that no one read." He was quiet for a moment, then laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard from him. "Maxime was right about you. How many other observations are buried in reports no one bothered to read?" "More than I can count." Over the next several hours, I walked him through patterns I'd identified but never shared. The correlation between certain meetings and subsequent accidents involving competitors, the way money moved through our legitimate businesses to obscure its origins, the networks of loyalty and obligation that held the organization together. "This," Dimitri said, pointing to my analysis of internal power structures, "this is exactly what Maxim needs. You see the organization as a system, not just individual pieces. It's how I've always seen it. No one asked before. They're asking now." That afternoon brought my first strategic meeting as a participant rather than a secretary. The conference room was the same one where Morozov had made his waterfront demands just days ago. But my position had shifted from the corner with my laptop to a seat at the table beside Maxim. The discomfort was immediate and obvious. 6 department heads, all men who'd grown accustomed to ignoring me, now had to acknowledge my presence as an equal. The tension was thick enough to taste. "Shall we begin?" Maxim asked, his tone making it clear that anyone who had a problem with the new arrangement could leave. The meeting covered expansion into new territories, specifically neighborhoods that had traditionally been contested ground between organizations. As various heads outlined their strategies, I noticed the same patterns I'd seen for years. Aggressive approaches that prioritized dominance over sustainability, short-term gains that ignored long-term consequences. "You disagree," Maxim said, not looking at me but clearly sensing my reaction. Everyone turned to stare. I'd spent 9 years not speaking in these meetings. Old habits screamed at me to defer, to apologize, to shrink back into invisibility. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. "The strategy focuses too much on confrontation. You'll win the territories, but you'll create enemies who'll spend years trying to take them back. There's a different approach." "Which is?" The head of security, Viktor Orlov, sounded skeptical. I pulled up files on my tablet, projecting them onto the room's screen. "These neighborhoods have businesses struggling with protection rackets from smaller organizations. Instead of fighting for control, we offer better terms. Protection that actually protects. Reasonable fees, legitimate services. We don't take the territory. We're invited in." "That's soft," Viktor scoffed. "This business requires strength." "Strength without strategy is just violence," I replied, keeping my voice level. Violence creates cycles of retaliation. Strategic positioning creates loyalty. Maxim was watching me with that intense focus I'd started to recognize. Continue. I outlined a plan I'd been developing for years in my head, never expecting to voice it. Instead of forcing our way into contested neighborhoods, we'd identify the most oppressive current operators and quietly support local businesses in resisting them. When those operations inevitably collapsed under combined pressure, we'd be there to fill the vacuum, but as protectors rather than conquerors. It's slower, I admitted, but it's sustainable, and it positions us as the reasonable choice rather than just another threat. The room was silent. Then Dmitri nodded slowly. It could work. We'd need to identify the right neighborhoods, the right timing. I already have. I pulled up another file, this one containing detailed analyses of 3 neighborhoods where the conditions were perfect for this approach. These locations have businesses ready to revolt against current protection schemes. Small investments in the right places would tip the balance. Maxim leaned back, something that might have been satisfaction crossing his face. Implement it. Start with the first neighborhood. Victor, you'll work with Larissa on this. Victor's expression made clear what he thought of taking orders from a former secretary, but he nodded stiffly. As the meeting continued, I felt the shift in dynamics. I wasn't just allowed to speak. My input was expected, valued. It was exhausting. After the meeting ended, Maxim gestured for me to stay as others filed out. Once we were alone, he moved to the windows, his usual thinking position. You've been planning that strategy for a while, he observed. Years. Since I started noticing the pattern of territorial conflicts that never actually resolved. And you never mentioned it because no one asked, and because suggesting strategic changes seemed above my position. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Also, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be more involved in this world than absolutely necessary. He turned to face me. And now? Now I don't have the luxury of distance. I met his gaze. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly. That means actually using everything I know, everything I've observed. Even when it puts you in direct conflict with people like Victor? Especially then. He's been operating on instinct and tradition for 20 years. Someone needs to challenge his assumptions. Maxim smiled, a rare, genuine expression. You're settling into this role faster than I expected. Is that a compliment or a concern? Both. He moved closer, that intensity in his gaze that always made my breath catch slightly. You're good at this, Larissa. Better than you probably realize. But that skill makes you valuable. And valuable things attract attention. Dangerous attention. I'm aware. Are you? He was close enough now that I could see the faint scar along his jawline, notice the exact shade of gray in his eyes. Because I need you to understand something. The protection I'm offering isn't just about security details and armored cars. It's about making you untouchable by association. But that only works if people believe you're truly mine. The possessive language should have bothered me. Instead, I felt a strange thrill at the certainty in his voice. Meaning we need to be seen together, not just in meetings, but socially. You need to be recognized as part of my inner circle, not just an employee. I thought about the implications. You want people to think we're involved. I want people to think you're under my protection in a way that matters. If they see you as just another advisor, you're vulnerable. If they see you as something more personal. He trailed off, letting me complete the thought. Then attacking me becomes attacking you directly. Exactly. It was strategic, I understood that. But there was something in the way he looked at me that suggested it wasn't entirely calculated. Or perhaps I was reading too much into intense gray eyes and carefully chosen words. What does that look like practically? I asked. Dinners, events, being seen together in contexts that suggest intimacy. not fabricated, but suggestive. He paused. I need you to be comfortable with that level of visibility. I've spent 9 years avoiding visibility. I know, which is why I'm asking rather than assuming. The consideration in his tone, the way he kept giving me choices even when we both knew the strategic necessity, made something warm unfold in my chest. Dangerous, that warmth. Dangerous to start feeling anything beyond professional respect for a man who operated in shadows and controlled through calculated moves. I'll manage, I said finally, though I should warn you that my social skills are rusty from years of being furniture. His laugh was unexpected, genuine. I've seen you handle Morozov and Victor in the same week. I think you'll be fine. The rest of that week blurred into a crash course in being visible. Dmitri walked me through the social landscape of our organization and its allies. Who mattered? Who was dangerous? Who could be trusted within carefully defined limits? Vitaly drilled me on security protocols until I could identify threats and plan exit strategies without conscious thought. And Maxim. Maxim was a constant presence, not hovering but available. Checking in on my progress, answering questions I'd been afraid to ask for years, occasionally sharing observations that revealed depths I'd never suspected. You studied economics, I said one evening as we reviewed financial reports in his office. Most of the building had emptied hours ago, but we'd fallen into a pattern of working late when the day's chaos finally quieted. MIT, full scholarship. He didn't look up from the spreadsheet he was annotating. Disappointed my father enormously by choosing business over the family tradition of law. Your father was a lawyer? District attorney, actually. Very passionate about justice. Maxim's smile was bitter. Would have been horrified by what I became. It was the most personal information he'd ever shared, and I found myself hungry for more. What happened to him? Died when I was 23. Heart attack, officially. Though I've always suspected the stress of discovering his son's real business interests contributed. The guilt in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. I set down my pen. You think he knew? I think he suspected and chose not to know for certain. Easier than confronting the reality that his son was building an empire in exactly the shadows he'd spent his career fighting. Maxim finally looked up, meeting my eyes. We all have prices we pay for our choices, Larissa. His was dying disappointed in me. And yours? Carrying that disappointment, knowing that everything I've built, everything I've become, would have broken his heart. The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. This wasn't the cold, calculating mob boss everyone feared. This was a man who'd chosen power over approval, and still felt the weight of that choice. Why are you telling me this? I asked softly. Because you should know who you're working for, not just the public version or the business version, but the person. He leaned back, that carefully controlled mask slipping back into place. You're trusting me with your future. Fair that I trust you with my past. Something shifted between us in that moment, some boundary crossed that hadn't existed before. We weren't just employer and employee, not anymore. We were two people who'd chosen each other in a world that didn't encourage trust, and that choice demanded honesty. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than he probably realized. For what? For seeing me. For 9 years I was invisible by necessity. Now I'm seen, and it's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Maxim's expression softened. You were always visible to me, Larissa. I just couldn't do anything about it until circumstances aligned. The admission sent warmth spreading through my chest, dangerous and welcome. I stood, needing distance to process the implications. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with Victor about the neighborhood initiative. How's that going? He hates taking input from me, but he's professional enough to implement the strategy properly. I gathered my materials. We'll see results within a month if the analysis is correct. It will be. His certainty was absolute. You don't make mistakes with data. As I headed for the door, his voice stopped me. "Larissa?" I turned back. "You're not alone in this anymore. Whatever happens, whatever challenges come, you have support now. Remember that." The promise settled into my bones like warmth after cold. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left before I could say something I'd regret. The elevator ride down gave me time to process. I was falling for him, I realized, with a mix of horror and inevitability. Falling for a man who operated in shadows, who'd built an empire on calculated violence and strategic manipulation. A man who saw me, truly saw me, in ways no one ever had. It was the worst possible complication, and I couldn't seem to stop myself. 3 weeks into my new role, the first real crisis hit. I was in Maxim's office reviewing preliminary results from the neighborhood initiative when Dmitri burst in without knocking, his normally composed face tight with tension. "We have a problem," he said, already moving to the secure monitor on the wall. One of our shipments was intercepted. 30 million in product, gone. Maxim's expression didn't change, but I felt the temperature in the room drop. "Where?" "Port Authority. Someone tipped them off about the exact container, exact timing." Dmitri pulled up security footage showing federal agents swarming our warehouse. This wasn't random. Someone inside gave them everything. My mind was already racing through possibilities, cataloging recent personnel changes, unusual behavior patterns, anyone with the access and motivation to betray the organization. But Maxim's next words stopped me cold. "Seal the building. No one leaves until we identify the leak." "Maxim," I began, but he cut me off with a look. "This is 30 million in losses and a federal investigation that could unravel years of carefully maintained cover. Someone in this organization sold us out. We find them, we make an example, or this happens again." The cold finality in his voice reminded me forcefully of what he was, what world I'd chosen to enter. This wasn't a corporate crisis to be managed with HR policies and careful PR. This was survival through fear and absolute control. "I need everyone who had access to that shipment's information in the conference room in 20 minutes, Maxim continued, his tone making clear this wasn't a request. "Dmitri, bring the files on all personnel involved in the operation." As Dmitri left to execute the orders, I remained standing there, processing the implications. "You're going to interrogate them. I'm going to find the traitor. And then what?" I needed to hear him say it, needed to understand exactly what I was part of. Maxim met my eyes directly. "Then I'm going to ensure they never betray anyone again. This is the world we operate in, Larissa. Betrayal has consequences. Lethal ones. Sometimes." He didn't flinch from the admission. "Is that going to be a problem for you?" It should have been. Every instinct cultivated over years of trying to maintain some moral distance from this business screamed that it should be. But I thought about the 30 million in losses, about the federal investigation that could bring down the entire organization, about everyone who depended on Maxim's empire for their livelihoods. "No," I said quietly, "but I want to be there when you question them." Surprise flickered across his face. "Why?" "Because I've spent 9 years observing these people. I might see things you miss." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But Larissa, this isn't going to be pleasant." I didn't think it would be. The conference room was already filling when we arrived, tension thick in the air as people tried to understand why they'd been summoned. Vitaly stood guard at the door, his presence making clear that leaving wasn't an option. Maxim took his position at the head of the table, and I sat beside him, acutely aware of every eye tracking my presence. This was different from strategic meetings. This was judgment, and I was publicly aligned with the judge. 3 hours ago, Maxim began, his voice carrying that dangerous calm I'd learned to recognize. A federal raid seized one of our most valuable shipments. Someone in this room provided the information that made that raid possible. The denials came immediately, a chorus of protests and shock. But I was watching faces, looking for the tells I'd learned to spot over years of observation. Most people looked genuinely confused or angry. A few looked nervous, but that could just be fear of being falsely accused. Then I saw it. Mikhail Petrov, one of the logistics coordinators, wasn't looking confused or angry, or even particularly nervous. He looked resigned. "Mikhail," I said quietly, interrupting someone's vehement declaration of loyalty. The room went silent. Mikhail's eyes met mine, and I saw confirmation in them before he looked away. "You've been sending information to the FBI," I continued, keeping my voice level. "Not just about this shipment. You've been feeding them details for at least 6 months. "Larissa," Dmitri started, but Maxim raised a hand for silence. "How do you know?" Maxim asked me, his gaze never leaving Mikhail. "He's been arriving early and staying late, but his work output hasn't increased proportionally. Someone reviewed his computer logs. They'd find encrypted communications disguised as personal email. And..." I paused, remembering a detail from 3 weeks ago. His daughter's medical bills were suddenly paid off last month. He couldn't afford that on his salary. Mikhail slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him. "She was dying," he said, his voice breaking. "My little girl was dying and I couldn't afford the treatment. They approached me, offered to cover everything if I just provided information." The room exploded with angry voices, but I kept watching Mikhail. He wasn't lying. The desperation in his eyes was real. He'd made a choice no parent should have to make: betray his employer or watch his child die. Maxim stood, moving around the table with predatory grace. "Everyone out, except Mikhail, Dmitri, and Larissa." The room emptied quickly, people eager to escape the tension. Once we were alone, Maxim stood behind Mikhail's chair, his hands resting on the back of it, in a gesture that was almost casual, but radiated threat. "How much did you give them?" Maxim asked. "Everything they asked for," Mikhail admitted, his voice hollow. "Shipment schedules, warehouse locations, personnel information. I'm sorry, Mr. Petrov. I'm so sorry. But my daughter..." "Your daughter is alive because you betrayed everyone in this organization." Maxim's voice was cold. 30 million in losses. A federal investigation that will take years to contain. Dozens of people whose livelihoods are now at risk because you made a choice. "I know." Tears were streaming down Mikhail's face now. "I know what I've done. But she's only 8 years old. And she was dying. What would you have done?" The question hung in the air, brutal in its honesty. I saw Maxim's jaw tighten, saw the conflict in his eyes. He understood the impossible choice, but understanding didn't change the reality of betrayal. "Dmitri," Maxim said quietly, "how much would Mikhail's daughter's treatment have cost?" Dmitri pulled up files on his tablet. "Approximately 400,000, based on the hospital records we have. And we would have covered it if he'd asked." The words sent shock through the room. I'd known Maxim had a fund for employee emergencies, but I hadn't realized it extended to expensive medical treatments. Mikhail looked up, his face a mask of anguish. "I didn't know. I thought... I was afraid to ask." "Because you assumed we'd say no." Maxim moved to the windows, looking out at the city. "Because you saw us as monsters who wouldn't help a dying child. So instead of asking your employer for help, you betrayed everyone who trusted you." "I'm sorry," Mikhail repeated, but the words were empty. Sorry wouldn't undo the damage. Maxim was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "Your daughter lives because of your choice. That matters. But 30 million in losses matter too. And the precedent of allowing betrayal matters most of all." "I understand," Mikhail's voice was barely audible. Do what you need to do. I watched Maxim's reflection in the window, saw the conflict playing across his face. He was a man who controlled an empire through absolute authority, and that authority demanded severe consequences for betrayal. But he was also a man who'd just learned that an employee had chosen treason over asking for help. "Larissa," he said without turning. "Your opinion?" The question surprised me. This was his world, his decision. Why ask me? But as I looked at Mikhail's defeated posture, at the wedding photo I could see peeking from his wallet on the table, I understood. Maxim was asking because he needed someone to remind him of the cost of mercy and the price of absolute power. He made a terrible choice, I said carefully. But he made it because he believed asking for help would be worse than treason. That's a failure of the organization as much as it's his failure. Dmitri looked shocked, but Maxim nodded slowly. Continue. He needs consequences. Everyone needs to see that betrayal isn't tolerated. But killing him or disappearing him sends the message that we're exactly what he feared. Monsters who value money over human life. It reinforces the culture that made him choose treason over asking. You're suggesting mercy. Maxim's tone was unreadable. I'm suggesting strategy. Yes, he caused massive losses. But those losses can be recouped. What can't be recouped is the message you send to every other employee who might face an impossible choice someday. Maxim turned from the window, his gray eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. And what message would you have me send? That we take care of our own, even when they make mistakes, even when those mistakes cost us. I looked at Mikhail. He violated trust. That has a price. But the price doesn't have to be his life. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if I'd overstepped. Then Maxim spoke, his voice carrying absolute authority. Mikhail, you're fired effective immediately. You'll repay the $400,000 we would have given you for your daughter's treatment, through structured payments over the next 20 years. You'll also provide us with detailed information about your FBI contacts, every communication, every piece of information you shared. Mikhail looked up, hope and confusion warring on his face. I'm not. You're not dying today, Maxim finished. But you're also not working in this city again. I'll arrange a position for you in another state, far from our operations and far from the FBI contacts who recruited you. You'll start over, and you'll spend the next 2 decades paying back what you cost us. Thank you, Mikhail breathed. Thank you, Mr. Petrov. Don't thank me. Thank Larissa. Maxim's gaze shifted to me. She reminded me that mercy can be strategic too. Get out of my sight before I change my mind. After Mikhail was escorted out by Vitaly, I sat alone with Maxim and Dmitri in the conference room. The tension was palpable. You just showed weakness, Dmitri said carefully. People will see it as such. People will see that Larissa Konstantin holds influence, Maxim corrected, using my new name for the first time. I'd legally changed it the week before, another layer of visibility in my transformation. They'll see that her judgment affects my decisions. That makes her more valuable and more dangerous to cross. Understanding dawned. The mercy wasn't just mercy. It was another strategic move, this time to elevate my position in the organization's eyes. You planned this? I said, the pieces clicking together. You knew I'd argue for a different approach. I hoped you would. I didn't know. Maxim stood, moving to the door. But I'm glad you did. Sometimes I need someone to remind me that power doesn't always require severity. After he left, Dmitri remained, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What? I finally asked. You're changing him, he said simply. In 10 years, I've never seen Maxim show that kind of restraint. He would have made an example of Mikhail, sent a message about betrayal. You gave him permission to be merciful. I just offered another perspective. No, Dmitri shook his head. You offered him what he's never had before, someone who sees both sides of who he is and values both. That's dangerous in its own way. How so? Because it makes him human, and humans have weaknesses that monsters don't. The words stayed with me as I returned to my apartment that evening. The security detail was there, invisible but present, a reminder of how much my life had changed in a few short weeks. I'd influenced a major decision today, had spoken up in a crisis and shaped the outcome. It should have felt empowering. Instead, I felt the weight of it. The responsibility of knowing my voice now carried consequences beyond my own life. My phone buzzed. Maxime. Thank you for today. You were right. I typed back. Were you testing me? His response came quickly. Always, but also genuinely conflicted. Your counsel mattered. And if I'd argued for severity, then we'd be having a very different conversation about who you are and whether I was wrong to trust you. The honesty was sobering. Every choice I made now was being evaluated, measured against what he needed from me. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. For what it's worth, I typed, I wasn't playing politics. I genuinely believed mercy was the better choice. I know. That's why it worked. I set down the phone and moved to my window, looking out at the city that Maxime partially controlled. Somewhere in those lights, Mikhail was packing to leave, his life fundamentally altered by a choice he'd made in desperation. Somewhere else, federal agents were trying to salvage an investigation I'd just helped derail. And here I was, Larissa Constantine, former invisible secretary, now a voice that shaped decisions in the shadows. The transformation was complete. The question was whether I could live with who I was becoming. My phone buzzed again. Dinner tomorrow? We should discuss the next phase of the neighborhood initiative, and other things. Other things. Those two words carried weight, implication. I knew I should be cautious, should maintain professional distance. But caution felt increasingly impossible when every interaction with Maxim pulled me deeper into something I couldn't quite name, but couldn't seem to resist. Dinner sounds good, I typed back. His response was simple. Good, I'll pick you up at 7. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Same face, but different eyes. Eyes that had watched a man choose between mercy and message, that had spoken up knowing the consequences, that had stopped being invisible and started being seen. There was no going back now. I could only move forward, into whatever came next, whatever transformation still awaited. The secretary was gone. Someone new was emerging in her place, and God help me, I was curious to see who she would become. Dinner turned into more than a strategic discussion. It turned into the first honest conversation Maxime and I had ever had outside the context of business or crisis. We met at a private restaurant he owned, the kind of place where powerful people discussed things they couldn't risk being overheard. But instead of talking about territories or organizations, we talked about ourselves. About the choices we'd made, the prices we'd paid, the people we'd become. I never wanted this life, Maxime admitted over wine that probably cost more than my old monthly salary. When I was young, I wanted to teach economics. Stupidly idealistic, I know. What changed? My father died owing debts to people who don't forgive debts. I could pay them with money I didn't have, or I could pay them with services I did. He swirled his wine, watching the light catch in it. I was good at it. Too good. By the time I could have walked away, I'd built something too large to abandon. I thought about that. About how we all made choices that seemed temporary, and woke up one day to find them permanent. Do you regret it? Some days. His eyes met mine. Less since you started working with me. The admission sent warmth through me that had nothing to do with the wine. Why? Because you see both who I am and who I might have been. You don't flinch from the first or mourn the second. You just accept it all. He leaned forward slightly. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I did, actually. I'd spent years watching people lie to each other, to themselves. Authenticity was the rarest commodity in this world. I understand making impossible choices, I said quietly. I've spent 9 years making them. Stay or go, speak up or stay silent, maintain distance or get involved. Every choice costs something. And now? Now I've made my choice. I'm here, fully here, for better or worse. I met his gaze. That scares me. Good. His smile was slight but genuine. Fear keeps you careful, and Larissa, in this world, careful keeps you alive. The conversation shifted after that, becoming lighter. We discovered shared taste in books, argued good-naturedly about films, found unexpected common ground in our views on education policy. It was surreal, sitting with a man who controlled a criminal empire through calculated violence, discussing whether schools needed more arts funding. But that was the complexity of Maxim, I realized. He wasn't just one thing. He was ruthless and thoughtful, dangerous and kind, calculating and surprisingly sincere. Understanding all those facets, accepting them, was what drew me to him, despite every logical reason to maintain distance. We were lingering over coffee when his phone buzzed. Maxim glanced at it, and I saw his expression shift, something dark sliding behind his eyes. What is it? I asked. Morozov. He set the phone down carefully. He's requesting an emergency meeting. Tomorrow, neutral territory. My stomach tightened. About what? He didn't specify, but emergency meetings are never good news. We drove back to my building in tense silence, both of us processing possibilities. At my door, Maxim caught my hand gently. Whatever this is tomorrow, I need you there, he said. Your perspective might be crucial. Of course. He hesitated, then leaned in and pressed a brief kiss to my forehead. The gesture was tender, protective, and sent electricity through my entire body. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow might be complicated. After he left, I stood in my empty apartment, fingers touching the spot he'd kissed, wondering when exactly I'd crossed the line from professional advisor to something far more dangerous. The next day, we arrived at the neutral meeting location, a upscale hotel conference room, to find Morozov already waiting with an unexpected companion, a federal prosecutor I recognized from news coverage of organized crime cases. Maxim, Larissa, Morozov said, his tone falsely jovial. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Maxim's expression remained neutral, but I felt him tense beside me. What is this, Leonid? This is me being generous. Morozov gestured to the prosecutor. Agent Harrison has some information you'll find interesting. About your recent shipment problems. My mind raced. Mikhail had already given us the FBI contact information. What else could there be? Agent Harrison pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. We've been investigating your organization for 3 years, Mr. Petrov, building a case that would have dismantled everything. Then suddenly, our best information source goes dark, and we're right back where we started. Tragic, Maxim said flatly. Indeed, but during our investigation, we accumulated substantial evidence, enough to prosecute not just you, but everyone in your organization. Harrison's smile was cold, including new personnel who've recently become more visible. The threat was clear, directed at me. I kept my expression carefully neutral even as fear coiled in my stomach. However, Morozov interjected, Agent Harrison and I have come to an arrangement. He'll make this evidence disappear, along with the entire investigation, in exchange for a few small considerations. Name them, Maxim said, his voice dangerously quiet. The waterfront, naturally. Our original agreement was nullified when you let Mikhail live instead of making an example of him. Morozov's smile widened. That kind of weakness, it suggests the terms should be renegotiated. And Larissa comes with me. Not as an employee transfer this time, but as insurance. You keep your organization. I get the waterfront and the assurance that you won't move against me because I'll be protecting something you value. The room went silent. I felt Maxim's fury like a physical force, barely contained. This was the real test, I realized. Morozov was betting that I'd become valuable enough to Maxim, that he'd trade everything to keep me safe. No, Maxim said, the single word absolute. No? Morozov's eyebrows rose. You're willing to let your entire organization collapse. Let everyone who depends on you face federal prosecution. For a secretary? She's not a secretary. Maxim's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. She's not tradable. Not now, not ever. How touching. Morozov's expression hardened. But impractical. Agent Harrison has enough evidence to destroy you. Unless you agree to my terms, by this time next week, you'll be in federal custody. I'd been quiet through this exchange, watching both men, analyzing the strategy. Now I leaned forward slightly. Agent Harrison, I said, my voice carrying across the table. What's your price? He blinked, clearly not expecting me to address him directly. Excuse me? Morozov doesn't have the authority to make deals on behalf of the FBI. You do. So what's your actual price for making this evidence disappear? Harrison shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that you're as corrupt as the people you investigate. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, negotiating with known criminals. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check something. I'm curious what your superiors would think if they knew about this meeting. Are you threatening me? I'm observing that Morozov's plan only works if you're actually willing to destroy evidence. But doing so is a federal crime that would end your career and likely put you in prison. I smiled slightly. So either you're here in an official capacity, gathering evidence of our crimes, or you're here to commit one yourself. Which is it? The silence that followed was electric. I'd called his bluff, exposed the fundamental weakness in Morozov's strategy. Harrison couldn't actually make the evidence disappear without risking everything. You're smarter than you look, Harrison said finally, standing. This meeting never happened. He left, and Morozov's confident expression crumbled into fury. That was a mistake, Larissa. Was it? I kept my voice level despite my racing heart. Because from where I'm sitting, you just showed that you had nothing to offer except empty threats. Your alliance with Harrison was built on mutual corruption, but he's not stupid enough to actually follow through. Morozov's hands clenched on the table. You think you've won? I think you overplayed your hand. I stood, Maxim rising beside me. You assumed I'd be a weakness you could exploit, but I'm the one who saw through your strategy. As we walked toward the door, Morozov called out, This isn't over, Petrov. You can't protect her forever. Maxim turned back, and the look on his face was deadly. Watch me. In the car afterward, I finally let myself shake. Maxim pulled me against his side, his arm solid and warm around my shoulders. That was incredibly dangerous, he said softly. I know. And brilliant. I looked up at him. I couldn't let him use me against you, against everyone who depends on this organization. You protected us. His hand came up to cup my face gently. You didn't have to. You could have stayed silent, let me negotiate. But I didn't want to. I wanted to fight. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability I'd never seen before. I would have given him the waterfront, everything, if necessary, to keep you safe. The admission made my chest tight. Maxim, I need you to understand something. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You stopped being a strategic asset weeks ago. He paused, searching for words. You're mine in ways that have nothing to do with business or protection. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm falling for you, Larissa. Have been since the moment you stood up to Morozov in that first meeting. Probably before. His smile was slight, almost shy. I'm saying that if you'd wanted to leave today, if you'd chosen his offer, it would have destroyed me in ways losing the organization never could. I should have been terrified by the intensity of his words, by the way they mirrored my own growing feelings. Instead, I felt something settle into place, some fundamental truth I'd been avoiding. I'm falling for you too, I admitted. It's probably the worst possible idea. Definitely the worst possible idea. His forehead rested against mine, but I've built an empire on bad ideas. What's one more? When he kissed me, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, certain, the culmination of weeks of tension and denial. I kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring into it everything I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. The desire, the connection, the impossible recognition that somewhere in the transformation from invisible secretary to visible partner, I'd fallen for a man who operated in shadows. We broke apart, both breathing hard. The driver wisely had raised the privacy screen. We should talk about this, I said, trying to find logic in the chaos. We should, Maxim agreed. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to know you're safe. That we're both safe. He drove me home but didn't leave, following me up to my apartment with the excuse of checking security. But once inside, he pulled me close again, and talking became the last thing on either of our minds. Later, as we lay tangled together in my bed, the city lights painting patterns across us, Maxim traced lazy circles on my shoulder. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now we figure out what this is, what we are. His voice rumbled through his chest. Now we navigate being partners in every sense, not just professional. Morozov won't give up. No, but he's shown his hand now. We know his strategies, his weaknesses, and most importantly, he knows you're not a weapon he can use against me. You're my equal in this, Larissa. My partner. Partner. The word carried weight, promise, acknowledgement of everything I'd become. I like the sound of that, I admitted. Good. Because I'm keeping you. His arm tightened around me. Forever, if you'll let me. Forever was a long time in a world as dangerous as ours. But lying there in the safety of his arms, I found myself wanting to believe it was possible. The next week settled into a new rhythm. Publicly, Maxim and I maintained professional distance, but privately, we were building something neither of us had expected, an actual relationship built on trust, honesty, and mutual recognition. The neighborhood initiative I'd designed succeeded beyond projections, with 3 territories peacefully integrated into our protection network. Victor grudgingly admitted I might know what I was talking about. Dmitri started consulting me on strategic decisions without waiting for Maxim's directive first. I was no longer just Maxim's advisor. I'd become an integral part of the organization's leadership, someone whose opinion shaped policy and direction. The invisibility I'd cultivated for years had been completely replaced by visibility I was learning to wield strategically. 6 months after the meeting where Maxim had first named me as his price, Morozov requested another negotiation. This time, I wasn't surprised when Maxim asked me to join him. We met at the same club where our original agreement had been finalized, but the dynamics had shifted fundamentally. I walked in not as property to be traded, but as Maxim's recognized partner, his equal in all ways that mattered. Larissa, Morozov greeted me with grudging respect. You look well. Powerful, even. Thank you. He turned to Maxim. I'm here to propose a truce. Our conflict is costing both our organizations unnecessarily. I'm prepared to formally recognize the current territorial divisions and cease attempts to undermine your operations. In exchange for? Maxim asked, his hand resting casually at the small of my back. Peace. And perhaps eventually, cooperation on matters of mutual interest. Morozov's gaze shifted to me. I underestimated you, Larissa. I thought you were a pawn. I was wrong. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. So let me ask you directly. What would it take for you to consider an alliance between our organizations? Not a merger, but genuine cooperation? I looked at Maxim, seeing the question in his eyes. Was I comfortable taking the lead on this? I nodded slightly. Transparency, I said to Morozov. No more games, no more manipulation attempts. If we're going to work together, it has to be built on honest assessment of mutual interests, not strategies designed to exploit weaknesses. Done. Morozov extended his hand, not to Maxim, but to me. Partners? I shook it, feeling the significance of the moment. Partners. As we left the club that evening, Maxim pulled me close. You know what you just did? Negotiated a truce? You established yourself as a power in your own right, not as my advisor, not as my partner, but as Larissa Constantine, someone who makes independent decisions that shape this world. The truth of it settled into my bones. I'd completed a transformation I'd never imagined when I first took that secretary job 9 years ago. From invisible furniture to visible power, from someone who documented decisions to someone who made them. How do you feel about that? I asked. Maxim's smile was genuine, proud. Like I made the best trade of my life when I chose you. Even though I was never actually yours to trade? Especially because of that. His kiss was soft, full of promise. You chose this path, chose me, chose to step into visibility. That choice made all the difference. We drove through the city toward a future neither of us could fully predict. Dangerous, certainly. Complicated. Absolutely. But built on something real. Mutual recognition, honest partnership, and the kind of love that emerged from truly seeing each other. I'd spent years being invisible, being small, being safe through obscurity. Now I was visible, powerful, and profoundly unsafe by traditional measures. But I was also fully alive in ways I'd never experienced before. The secretary was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who'd found her voice and her power by being brave enough to step into the light. And I wouldn't trade that for anything,